I was rushing home from the supermarket that fateful afternoon, my arms laden with groceries for my 40th birthday dinner. My heart was set on creating a perfect evening, intimate and special, with just my closest friends and family. Lost in thought about the upcoming celebration, I stepped off the sidewalk into the parking lot. That's when my world suddenly tilted on its axis. A car appeared out of nowhere, and I tumbled to the ground, my carefully selected groceries scattering across the cold asphalt like autumn leaves. I let out a cry of surprise and pain, my voice echoing in the empty parking lot. "I'm so sorry," a deep voice called out, filled with genuine concern. "Oh my goodness, what happened? Where did you come from?" I exclaimed, my heart still racing from the shock. The driver, clearly shaken, hurried to help me to my feet, his strong hands gentle despite his obvious distress. "You could have hit me," I cried out, nursing my injured hand while glaring at him through tears of pain and frustration. "Do you even have a driver's license?" I demanded, my voice trembling with a mixture of anger and lingering fear. "Of course I do. But maybe you should have been paying more attention yourself," the stranger protested, his handsome face creased with concern despite his defensive words. "You really should have been more careful," he added, though his voice held more worry than accusation. I shot him a look that could have melted steel, my pride as bruised as my body. His expression softened immediately, regret washing over his features. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said that," he said, his voice gentling like a summer breeze. "Please, let me drive you home," he offered, already bending to gather the scattered groceries. "I'll pick these up for you." My anger faded as I watched him carefully gather his scattered purchases. I had to admit, if only to myself, that I shared some of the blame for this mishap. Taking a deep breath to calm my racing heart, I softened my tone. "You're right, I was careless too." "I'm sorry," I conceded, surprising myself with my own honesty. "I was just lost in my thoughts," I added, suddenly feeling vulnerable under his intense gaze. "And yes, a ride home would be wonderful, thank you." "I'm Derek," he said with a smile that transformed his entire face, extending his hand in a gesture that seemed to bridge more than just the physical space between us. In the car, our conversation flowed naturally, and the earlier tension melted away. "Your husband is a fortunate man," he remarked unexpectedly, his eyes briefly meeting mine in the rearview mirror. "To have such a beautiful and graceful wife," he added, his words sending an unexpected flutter through my chest. "I'm a single father," he continued, a shadow crossing his face. "My wife left me, and our little girl. We're making it work, just the two of us." "Oh, you have a child?" I managed to respond, feeling my heart constrict at the mention of children. It was always like this, the mere mention of children sent a sharp pain through my heart, a reminder of my own inability to conceive despite years of marriage and countless prayers. The topic of children had always been my private cross to bear, a silent suffering that no one else could truly understand. After so many years of marriage, the absence of a child's laughter in our home had become a constant ache in my heart, a dream that seemed forever out of reach. I couldn't share such private pain with a stranger, so I simply replied, "We don't have any children. Here we are. Is this the right place?" Derek asked, pulling up to the curb. "Yes, thank you for the ride," I said softly. "Have a good day, then." The car had stopped in front of an imposing iron gate, behind which stood my beautiful mansion, a testament to what I'd once thought was marital success. "I'm sorry if I upset you earlier," Derek said, noticing the change in my demeanor, though he couldn't understand its true cause. "No, I'm the one who should apologize," I murmured. "I've been a bit on edge lately." "Thank you again, really." Once inside, I hurriedly unpacked the groceries and began preparing for dinner, my hands busy while my mind wandered. When the table was perfectly set and guests were due to arrive, I called my husband, but Daniel didn't answer, again. I let out a deep sigh that seemed to carry the weight of years of disappointment. Lately, Daniel had been working late, always working late. Whenever I tried to talk to him, he'd become irritated, claiming there were important project deadlines. I had grown accustomed to his absence, telling myself this was just how marriage evolved over time. Suddenly, the doorbell's chime broke through my melancholy thoughts. On the intercom screen, I saw Julia and William's smiling faces, their joy a stark contrast to my mood. They were our friends from college days, a couple who'd stayed together, and Daniel's only real friends. My husband had always been peculiar about letting new people into his life, preferring to maintain only his long-standing friendships from younger days. "Michelle, you look absolutely radiant today. You could easily pass for someone in their 20s. Julia exclaimed with genuine warmth. "Happy birthday, Michelle," William said, presenting me with a stunning bouquet. "So where's our workaholic Daniel? Still not home?" Julia asked, her tone carrying a hint of criticism. "Oh, you know how it is. Business always comes first for Daniel," I replied, trying to keep the bitterness from my voice. "I don't know how you stand it. Missing your special day, aren't you tired of being alone all the time? Why don't you consider working again?" As it happens, William's looking for a new architect, and we haven't found anyone suitable yet. You were brilliant in college, what do you say? Julia suggested, clearly sensing the heavy atmosphere in my home. "That would be wonderful, but Daniel would never allow it," I replied, hating how defeated I sounded. "Michelle, I know this might not be my place, but I need to say something," Julia said firmly. "Daniel is being incredibly selfish, and you're foolish to let him control you like this. Can't you see what he's doing? Keeping you as a housewife while he does whatever he pleases? You're just too convenient for him," Julia stated, her words cutting through my carefully constructed defenses. "Let's not talk about Daniel anymore. Thank you for caring, but dinner is ready, shall we move to the table?" I said, trying to ease the tension as I guided my guests to the celebration. After we finished our meal and were reminiscing about our college days, Daniel finally made his appearance. His smile at our guests was more about politeness than pleasure at seeing them. "Daniel, couldn't you have come home earlier? We haven't seen each other in ages, and it's your wife's birthday," Julia exclaimed. "And where's the bouquet for your beloved wife?" she added, unable to stay silent about his empty hands. "Hey, great to see you all. Sorry I'm late, but you know how work is, right Julia? Business doesn't wait. Didn't even have time to buy flowers. I rushed here as it is." "Happy birthday, Michelle," he said, handing me a small box. "Thank you, Daniel," I replied, opening the box with a sad smile. He had never bothered to spend time choosing gifts every year, like clockwork. It was jewelry, and this year was no different. The master of the house's arrival brought a brief surge of energy to the table, but his constant phone messages kept interrupting our conversation. As the night wore on and our friends bid their farewells, silence descended once again. I began clearing the table while Daniel remained absorbed in his phone. When I finished cleaning up, I turned to my husband and asked, "Daniel, can't you spend some time with me when you're home?" "Don't start with that. I'm busy with work," he snapped. "I see," was all I could manage. I rose from my seat without another word and headed to our bedroom, desperately fighting back tears. Once inside, those tears finally broke free, cascading down my cheeks like a released flood. Despite being married, I felt utterly alone, like an unwanted presence in my husband's life. My father had passed away when I was young, and my relationship with my stepfather from my mother's second marriage had never been good. Thank heavens for my friends who had been my pillars of support. Without them, my loneliness would have been complete. Remembering tonight's conversation with my friends, I seriously considered the possibility of working again. Perhaps it would give me a productive way to spend my time, and I wouldn't feel this crushing loneliness quite so much. The next morning, I woke early to find the space beside me empty, my husband's absence a cold void in our bed. Something felt terribly wrong, an ominous feeling creeping through my chest like a winter chill. Making my way to Daniel's study, I noticed the door slightly ajar and peered inside, only to find him asleep on the sofa. My heart pounded against my ribs like a trapped bird seeking escape. His recent behavior had become increasingly strange, and I could no longer ignore the warning signs flashing in my mind. After showering and making myself presentable, I descended to the living room. There sat Daniel at the dining table, coffee cup in hand, staring out the window as if searching for answers in the morning sky. He was so lost in thought he didn't notice me at first, jumping slightly when I greeted him. "You've been acting strange lately. Why did you sleep in your study? Are you avoiding me? Or is something wrong at work?" I asked, all my worries tumbling out at once. "We need to talk," he replied with an eerily calm voice. "Yes, we do," I agreed. "I know you won't like this, but I've decided to start working again." Daniel ignored my declaration entirely, instead delivering his own devastating news in a flat, emotionless tone. "I'm in love with another woman. She's pregnant with my child." My vision blurred as if someone had thrown a veil over my eyes. I swayed on my feet, barely able to remain standing. "How long have you been seeing her?" was all I could manage to ask. "What does it matter to you?" "I just found out about the pregnancy yesterday." "I see. Thank you for not ruining my birthday," I whispered as tears began streaming down my face. "Listen, don't make a scene," Daniel said coldly. "Daniel, have you ever considered my feelings at all? Do I mean nothing to you?" "Michelle, I'm 40 years old, and everyone we know has children. But we don't," Daniel shouted, completely ignoring my tears. "You have no right to blame me for our childlessness. You know how hard I tried with the fertility treatments, how many doctors I saw. Stop this performance. You're acting like some tragic heroine," Daniel cut me off dismissively. "Thousands of people get divorced and move on. Try to understand. I can finally have a child and be happy. We'll discuss the divorce details when I get home tonight," Daniel said, slamming the door behind him as he left. I collapsed to the floor, sobbing from the pain and humiliation of it all.
Daniel decided to stop by Bridget's apartment first to tell her that he had confessed everything to his wife and would be getting divorced soon. When he unlocked the door to the apartment he had rented for Bridget, he was shocked to find her packing clothes into a massive suitcase. "Hi Bridget, why aren't you greeting me? What on earth are you doing?" he asked with a forced smile. "Going somewhere?" Bridget jumped at the sight of Daniel. "Oh, welcome home Daniel, you're early today. Where are you planning to go?" Daniel asked, wrapping his arms around her. Bridget put on an exaggerated expression, causing Daniel to eye her suspiciously. "Yes, I'm going to your house. Your wife is there, isn't she? I'm going to take her place." "Bridget, she has nowhere else to go right now. Even if we're getting divorced, I can't just throw her out on the street before she finds a place to live," Daniel explained with a frown. But Bridget wouldn't listen. "We're about to become a family of 3, yet we're crammed into this miserable little apartment while she lives comfortably alone in that big house. It's not fair. Besides, our baby needs fresh air, but here we are forced to breathe this polluted city air." Bridget dramatically rubbed her stomach, nearly in tears as she tried to make her argument more convincing. "All right, you're right. But please try to stay calm for now. We don't want to upset the baby. We'll move just like you want," Daniel said.
Meanwhile, I sat stunned on the sofa for hours, my husband's betrayal leaving me unable to gather my thoughts. After half a day of sitting there, I desperately wanted to believe this was just a cruel joke. Daniel would come back and tell me it was all just a prank, I kept repeating to myself, like a desperate mantra. Suddenly, my phone's vibration sent tremors through my body. Though I didn't want to speak to anyone, I wiped my tears and looked at the screen, my heart pounding wildly in my chest. It was Daniel. I managed to answer the call, but the knot in my throat wouldn't let me speak. "Michelle, listen. I've found an apartment for you to move into. You need to go see it," Daniel said matter-of-factly. I hung up without responding to his deranged conversation, feeling that such matters should be discussed face to face, not over the phone. I made myself some herbal tea and settled on our comfortable terrace, the terrace of the home I loved so dearly. We had bought this house when we were young, pouring our souls into it, building our life together piece by piece. And now Daniel acted as if those years never existed, casually telling me he'd found me an apartment. Traitor! I screamed, wiping away fresh tears. I tried to calm myself, but happy memories of our marriage kept flooding back, giving me no rest. Feeling utterly defeated, I sat contemplating how I would face this lonely life ahead of me. I was still lost in thought when night fell, not even noticing when Daniel returned home. He found me and immediately launched into what he clearly thought was a serious conversation. Why did you hang up suddenly and ignore my calls? We're adults. Let's handle this divorce peacefully and amicably. I won't stop you from leaving. Won't stop me? If you want to be with your mistress, you go ahead. If you've found an apartment, you should be the one to move there. This is my house. I won't leave just to make room for your mistress. At worst, we can sell the house and split the money, that would be fair. Actually, remember this house is in my mother's name? Isn't that wonderful? Now I understand why my mother insisted so strongly on keeping the deed in her name. How clever of her. Remember how I sold my own apartment years ago, and invested everything into buying this house? I fired back, giving him no chance to interrupt. I remember everything. That's why I found you an apartment to live in. Go look at it, and let's get this divorce over with quickly. You can go live there yourself, Daniel said dismissively. Daniel, remember this, you'll have to take responsibility for everything in this life, I said with quiet intensity. And you'll definitely have to answer for all the pain you've caused me. The next day, I went to see the apartment Daniel had found for me. On the way there, memories flooded my mind, how happy we had been, how many obstacles we'd overcome together to achieve our dreams, how much effort we'd put into making our house a home, and how I'd supported him while sacrificing my own career. After sharing so many joys and sorrows, I couldn't understand how he could so easily find a replacement for me. Finally, I understood that the main reason for our divorce was our childlessness, a fact that pierced my heart like a dagger. How many times had I visited the best doctors, endured countless medications, and suffered through endless injections? Yet it had all been for nothing. The doctors just shrugged their shoulders, unable to explain why we couldn't conceive after all these years together. Though Daniel never directly blamed me for this issue, I knew he was convinced the problem lay with me. Lost in these painful thoughts, I barely noticed when I arrived at the entrance to my supposed new home. The fifth-floor apartment was spacious and bright. While it couldn't compare to our house, it would certainly be comfortable enough to live in. The next day, my bags were mostly packed. I took only what was truly mine, looking back at my home with a heavy heart. I had loved this house, even though I never found true happiness within its walls. Daniel, what are you doing? A woman's voice called from behind me. I turned to find myself face to face with a beautiful, confident young woman who looked about 20 years my junior. She could have passed for Daniel's daughter, that's how young she was. I forced a smile despite the lump in my throat. Though I wanted to run away, I steadied myself and responded calmly. This is still my house, Daniel. And let me remind you, I'm still legally your wife, I said firmly. Young lady, what exactly do you think you're doing here? That's quite a question, isn't it? Have you no shame or conscience? I turned to Bridget with barely contained fury. Then I turned to my husband and added, I told you not to bring your mistress here, before I've even moved out. She's not my mistress, she's the mother of my child. Don't make such a scene. I haven't even let her inside yet. We're modern people, after all, Daniel said defensively. Oh yes, very modern indeed, I laughed bitterly. Daniel, you're completely blind. Look at her, Can't you see looking for a sugar daddy written all over her forehead? Are you really that naive? Daniel frowned but remained silent. Bridget dramatically rolled her eyes and began stroking her still flat stomach. I couldn't help but laugh at the performance. Daniel, this girl is a natural-born actress. Your life of surprises is just beginning. Just then, my phone rang, bringing a wave of relief. My taxi had arrived at the front gate. I dragged my 2 large suitcases toward the exit, ready to leave this chapter of my life behind. Daniel watched me go with evident sadness in his eyes, something clearly troubling him. But Bridget, sensing this wasn't going her way, quickly resumed her performance, determined to recapture the attention of the man she idolized. Daniel, I'm having such terrible pains in my lower abdomen, Bridget whimpered dramatically. My husband snapped back to attention immediately. Don't worry, everything will be fine, he soothed. Just rest now, like the doctor said, he added, gently supporting her waist as he helped her sit down. I left my beloved home with my dignity intact, though it nearly broke me to see the woman who destroyed my family receiving such tenderness and care from my husband. I couldn't even find the courage to imagine what my future might hold. In the taxi, I finally let my tears fall freely. The driver caught my eye in the rearview mirror with a sympathetic glance and asked, "Are you all right, ma'am? Is there anything I can do to help?" I'm sorry. I just can't control my emotions, I managed to say between sobs. My husband brought his pregnant mistress to our home. That's all. Impossible to think he'd need a replacement for someone as beautiful as you. Your husband must be a fool. The driver declared. Thank you, but I'm already 40. Not young anymore. His mistress is so young. Youth is wonderful, isn't it? I replied with bitter resignation. You're only 40. That's the perfect age for maturity, life experience, and even romance. Youth means nothing. I'm 67, and let me tell you, as someone with more life experience, everything will work out fine for you. Your husband will come crawling back one day, but by then, you won't need him anymore. It might feel like the end of the world now, but trust me, someday you'll laugh about all this, the driver said with conviction. I felt truly grateful for this wonderful stranger's support and kind words. As I listened to him speak, a small seed of hope for a happier future began to take root in my heart. In my new place, I began organizing my life piece by piece. The apartment in the new building was spacious and comfortable, but it couldn't compare to the cozy home where I'd spent so many years. If it hadn't been for the support of my friends Julia and William, I might have gone mad from loneliness and sad memories. William didn't hesitate to hire me. At his company, a gesture that touched my heart deeply. Gradually, I found myself adjusting to the new work environment, warmly welcomed by the team. When I received my first paycheck in years, I felt an overwhelming sense of joy and independence. Julia visited my apartment frequently, while William took it upon himself to cut all ties with Daniel. Daniel called him once, but William refused to forgive his friend's betrayal. One night, I was working late at the office. There was an urgent project that had to meet its deadline. William was convinced that if we failed, the client would sign with our competitors. Drawing on my years of university training, I threw myself into the work, determined to solve the crisis. After completing the project, I left it on William's desk and headed out of the office. The night was cold and damp, with a biting wind that cut straight through my coat. I shivered in the cold. Oh, I should have called for a taxi earlier, I muttered to myself. Looking around, I spotted car lights across the street. The road seemed empty, so I decided to take a shortcut across it. Just as I stepped onto the road, a car came tearing around the corner. The headlights blinded me, and I stumbled at the sound of screeching brakes. Do you have a death wish? A man's voice called out as he got out of the car. You're the one who's crazy. Watch where you're driving. I shot back, though I knew I'd been careless too. Well, if it isn't you again. What a way to keep meeting, the man said with a laugh. His voice seemed familiar, but the headlights were still dazzling me, and I couldn't make out the driver's face as he approached. "Here, let me help you." "Give me your hand," he offered. "Thanks." "Oh, my knees and hands are scratched up, and tomorrow's such an important day. I have to present this project to the client, and you've ruined everything," I accused him. "Well, then I'll have to tell this client about how their architect likes to throw herself under car wheels," he teased. "You're impossible." "But you're right, that's exactly who I am," I sighed in response. "Come on, get in. I'll drive you home," he said. "All right, I could use the help. I don't want to walk like this." "But remember, this is your responsibility, you nearly ran me over." "After all," I said as I stood up and climbed into the passenger seat. When the man turned to face me, I gasped in surprise. "Derek, that was your name, wasn't it?" "That's right. I knew it was you right away," he replied, and we both laughed. "What a coincidence." "I remember where you live," he said with a smile. I gave him a sad smile and replied, "Actually, a lot has happened since then, and I'm living somewhere else now." "Do you know that new apartment complex?" "Oh yes, of course I do. I live there too," he said. "So we're neighbors now," he smiled. "Forgive my asking, but why did you move to an apartment?" "My daughter and I dream of moving to a house someday, so I'm curious." "I got divorced," I said quietly. "My husband bought this apartment as my new home, and here I am." "But I remember you having such a happy home not too long ago." "I did, once. But not anymore. We couldn't have children. My husband had a mistress, and she got pregnant. They're living their happy life in that house now, while I'm in the apartment. That's all. Does that satisfy your curiosity?" "I'm so sorry, Michelle. I had no idea." Derek remained silent for the rest of the drive. When we arrived, he said, "So we're neighbors now. I live across the street. I hope this won't be the last time we meet, though perhaps under better circumstances next time." "Thank you for the ride," I smiled. I didn't fall asleep until dawn, my mind filled with thoughts about work, the project, and Derek. There was something charming about him, and I felt at ease in his presence. I found myself hoping we would meet again in more pleasant circumstances. The next morning, I finally opened my eyes and looked at the clock, horror washing over me. I overslept. Oh no, today of all days. I rushed around my apartment, trying to get ready as quickly as possible. In 10 minutes flat, I managed to change completely, fix my mascara, apply blush, and pull my long hair into a tight updo. I cursed myself for not calling a taxi in advance, deeply regretting my oversight. "Good morning, neighbor," a familiar voice called from behind me. I turned around, simultaneously relieved and flustered. "Derek, help me. I'm going to be late for an important meeting," I called out while running toward his car. I was working late on the project last night, and overslept. Today's meeting is crucial for my future and the company's reputation. Well, how could I refuse a beautiful woman in distress? Derek said, adding, "As it happens, I have an important meeting near where I almost ran you over yesterday. I can give you a ride, but on one condition, have lunch with me sometime." "Thank you, Derek," I called out as I approached the office, jumping out of the car and rushing into the building. I could feel Derek's smile following me as I ran inside. I later learned that Derek was watching me leave and wondering how my ex-husband could be so foolish as to let a beautiful woman like me out of his life. After parking his car, Derek headed toward the same building where I had gone. Meanwhile, I managed to make it to the meeting room, breathless but on time. Phew, I made it, I sighed with relief. I turned to William and asked, "Did you look at the materials?" I tried to meet all the client's requirements. Though the construction is planned near the river, I've solved the flooding issues. I showed William the solution on the blueprints. William stood in stunned admiration for several seconds. You're a miracle worker," William exclaimed, "to accomplish all this in one night." He added urgently, "The client will be here any minute. The project's success rests on you." "Thank you, William. I'll make this presentation perfect," I assured him. "I apologize for being late," came a familiar voice as the door opened. I could barely stay standing as I recognized who it was. "Derek?" I turned toward the voice, stunned. "What are you doing here?" I asked in disbelief. Derek smiled warmly and said, "What a delightful surprise, Michelle. It seems I'm the demanding client who kept you working so late last night," he added with a twinkle in his eye. William was tense at first but relaxed when he saw our friendly interaction. "Good morning, Mr. Foy," William said, extending his hand. "I had no idea you knew Michelle." "Good morning," Derek replied. "Yes, Michelle and I are friends and neighbors," he explained. "I look forward to our meeting today. Shall we proceed with the presentation?" William suggested. The negotiations proceeded in a comfortable atmosphere, and I could see Derek was clearly impressed by my professionalism. To be honest, Derek admitted, I approached another firm with similar questions, but their project failed. "But you've succeeded where they couldn't," he added, looking at me with admiration. "It wasn't just my effort," I replied modestly. "The whole team has been working on this house project," I explained. Derek's face lit up as he said, "I really like this project, Michelle. I'd like to show you the construction site," he continued. "Would tomorrow work for you to discuss the details?" Derek asked, his eyes meeting mine. I felt myself blushing and looked at William for guidance. William smiled knowingly and said, "Michelle, you seem to have an excellent relationship with our client. You'll be leading this project through to completion. Take good care of it," he added with a meaningful look. I was in high spirits all day long, feeling my life gradually moving in a positive direction. I barely thought about my unfaithful ex-husband anymore. Derek shared many of his plans for the future with me, and I found myself drawn to every aspect of them. His sense of humor, his sincerity, his way of communicating, his thoughtfulness, everything about him appealed to me, especially those honest eyes and that warm smile. Derek and I were so engrossed in conversation that we didn't notice Chloe entering the kitchen. "Daddy, who is this?" Chloe asked. "How are you feeling, Chloe?" Derek turned to his daughter with a smile. "Come here, I want you to meet Daddy's friend. This is Michelle. She lives next door and came to help when she heard you were sick." "Hello, Michelle," Chloe said. "I'm Chloe." "Hello, Chloe. I'm so happy to meet you," I said, looking at my new acquaintance with curiosity. "Chloe, you're such a beautiful girl. Do you have any children, Michelle?" Chloe asked. "No, unfortunately, I don't," I replied honestly. "But I've always wanted a beautiful, sweet daughter just like you." "That's a great idea. Tomorrow's a day off anyway," Derek said. Chloe clapped her hands with joy and hugged me.
Yay!
"Michelle's staying with us." Derek looked at me questioningly, clearly concerned about my comfort level. "If your team will have me, I'd love to join," I said, stroking the little girl's rebellious curls. Chloe leaned against me, resting her head on my shoulder. I was deeply touched by the girl's sincerity, warmth, and openness. From that day forward, something special began to grow between Derek and me. Chloe was delighted that I started visiting their home frequently. The three of us spent wonderful times together, playing board games, watching movies, and making regular trips to amusement parks and zoos. After spending several months together, I couldn't imagine life without Derek and Chloe anymore, and similarly, they couldn't imagine their lives without me. Meanwhile, the project was progressing rapidly. William entrusted me with another complex project, which I handled brilliantly. The employees now came to me with their difficult problems, and I never refused to help. One day, I noticed William acting strangely when he came to the office, and I decided to find out what was troubling my friend. "William, may I come in?" "I brought coffee," I said, knocking on my boss's office door, with a cup in hand. "Hey, Michelle, please come in," William smiled in response. "Is something wrong? You seem troubled." "Ah, yes. Remember how Daniel had lent me some money? Well, it seems he's having some business problems, and now that Bridget has had the baby, he's demanding I repay the loan earlier than planned. That's not all. He asked me to tell you something too. He says he won't be making any more payments on your apartment loan because he has a family now." I expected as much. I was surprised to learn the apartment was bought with a loan, but Daniel promised to pay regularly when we divorced. I trusted him and was fooled again, I sighed. "I'll return the money he lent me within a week, Michelle. We were friends for so long, yet I can't understand him. How could he do this? When you bought that house, you sold your own apartment and invested everything in it, and now he's living there with another woman." I really wanted to punch him, but the coward wouldn't even meet with me. "He said the money should go to his account, and when I took your side, he said there was nothing more to discuss," William explained. "William, I have a job now. I'm earning a good salary, and I have a wonderful boss. I'll pay the apartment loan myself," I said. "I've learned my life lesson. Back then, I was young and naive. I never imagined things would turn out like this. But he has a child now," I added with a sad smile. "Daniel always wanted children. So of course, he should focus on their future now. Michelle, how can you still feel sorry for him after everything he's done? You don't need to make excuses for him anymore. Anyway, you're not alone anymore. We'll protect you. The company's reputation has improved thanks to you, and I'm grateful. That's why I've decided to give you a raise," William said. "Thank you, William. Would it be alright if I left early today? My work is finished, and I need to stop somewhere on my way home. It's my birthday, and Derek helped me pick out a present. I just need to go pick it up," I smiled. "Oh. Derek helped you choose a present?" William smiled knowingly. "Are you two getting close?" "I don't know, William," I admitted. "But I feel something like destiny. Derek is such a wonderful person, and Chloe is absolutely adorable. They've become essential to my life now. Michelle, you're glowing. Don't let this chance slip away," William encouraged. "Thank you." A year had passed since then. "Your house is absolutely incredible," William exclaimed, admiring the view of the river from our terrace. "When are you planning to move in?" he asked. "When the time is right," I replied, gently stroking my rounded belly while looking at Derek with eyes full of happiness. Derek wrapped his arms around me and placed a tender kiss on my cheek. "There's still a bit more to do. Once the interior work is finished, I think we'll be ready. We'll probably stay in our current place until after the baby is born, then make the move," he added. "How exciting. I'm truly happy for your new family," William said warmly. "I never thought I could be this happy," I said, and William responded with a heartfelt smile. "Derek, please don't hesitate to ask us for help if you need anything. We're always here for you. Michelle is precious family to us too." "Thank you, William. Well, let's head back to Julia and the kids. They're probably missing us." When we returned to William's house, we could see the children playing ball in the yard. Julia was busy setting the table, preparing the dessert she had made for us. By this time, my life had gradually improved from the days when I had been abandoned and betrayed. The issues with my apartment were resolved thanks to the lawyer William had hired. With my good salary, I was able to finish paying off the property loan. I married Derek 6 months after we met, and Chloe was overjoyed to finally have a mom, just like her friends. We had built the kind of warm, trusting, and loving relationship that many people envied. Derek adored me as his wife and deeply appreciated my contributions to raising his daughter. Chloe was excited about getting a brother or sister soon. She would go shopping with me, helping to pick out baby items for her future sibling. One day, while Derek was away on business, I went to my scheduled clinic appointment. Julia had agreed to watch Chloe, especially since her son Jeffrey was eager to play with her. I left the clinic in high spirits. The baby was developing well, with a strong, steady heartbeat. Though I had been worried about my age and pregnancy, everything seemed fine. After leaving the clinic, I decided to go to the shopping mall to look for toys for Chloe and Jeffrey. However, an unpleasant surprise was waiting for me at the mall. I came face to face with Daniel, who froze when he saw my pregnant belly. "Michelle, you look well. Nice to see you." "I had no idea you were pregnant," he stammered, unable to hide his shock. "Hello, Daniel. My pregnancy is none of your concern. I heard you had a son. Congratulations. Well, I should go. Goodbye."
Daniel stood motionless, watching his ex-wife walk away. When he returned home, his young son came running to greet him. Bridget sat on the living room sofa, completely absorbed in her phone screen. "Bridget, shall we think about dinner?" Daniel asked from the doorway. Bridget looked up at him with obvious displeasure. "Did you forget I asked you to transfer money to my account?" she demanded, ignoring his question. "Is that all you have to say, Bridget? You've been acting strange lately. Are you all right?" Daniel asked. "I'm not acting strange, Daniel. I'm simply asking why you're ignoring my requests." "This isn't a request, it sounds more like a command," Daniel said gravely. "Work is tough right now. Money isn't infinite. We need to be smart about spending it. The way you're using money now, we'll go bankrupt." "Oh right, you were once married to someone who knew how to manage money wisely. But she's gone now. I want new clothes. I refuse to look pathetic like your ex-wife." Bridget complained bitterly. "Shut up. You have no right to speak ill of Michelle. You're not worth her little finger. If it weren't for the son," Daniel said darkly as he headed toward his son's room. Realizing she had gone too far, Bridget retreated to the kitchen to prepare dinner. Daniel tried to calm himself by focusing on his son, but the boy's words raised troubling questions. His son chatted about having ice cream and playing with an unknown uncle that day. That night, Daniel asked his wife what she had done that day. Bridget vaguely answered that she had been home all day. Daniel couldn't get Michelle out of his mind that night. The thought of his ex-wife finding happiness with someone else was driving him mad. Waves of irrational jealousy kept overwhelming him. The next day, Daniel left for work as usual. Before leaving, he told Bridget, "I've transferred money to your account. Go buy yourself some new clothes." At these words, Bridget smiled and literally threw her arms around his neck. "Thank you. I love you. I'm off," Daniel said. He gently pushed away her arms and left. That day, Daniel didn't go to work until evening. Instead, he decided to follow Bridget to see if she was really going shopping with their son. He quickly witnessed her betrayal with bitter disappointment. Bridget drove to a residential area and parked in front of a 10-story building. She carried their son inside. Daniel waited patiently for her to come out. However, as dusk approached, she hadn't returned to her car. Finally, she emerged, accompanied by a young man carrying their son on his shoulders. Daniel managed to control his anger but didn't confront her then. Questions began forming in his mind as he sought to uncover the whole truth.
Meanwhile, Derek and I had finished building our dream house and were making plans to spend the weekend there, with William and Julia. "Derek, I need to stop by the apartment for a bit," I said. "I want to water the flowers since we won't be back for a few days. Would it be all right if Chloe came along to help?" "Of course, Michelle. You'll get it done faster together," Derek replied. At the apartment, Chloe and I were watering the plants. She was singing while watering the flowers, trying her best to entertain me with her melodies. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. "Chloe, could you get that? It's probably Daddy. But remember to ask who it is before opening," I cautioned the little girl. "Yes, Mama." Chloe ran to the door and asked who was there. When she heard an unfamiliar voice, she immediately called for me. Looking through the peephole, I was shocked to see an unwanted visitor. "Daniel, what are you doing here?" I asked as I opened the door. "I need to talk to you. I was such a fool. Can you forgive me? Please, I'm begging you to give me another chance," Daniel pleaded. I smiled at Chloe. "Chloe, sweetie, would you check if we've watered all the flowers? I need to talk to this person for a moment." Chloe obediently nodded and disappeared behind the room door. "Daniel, have you lost your mind? I have a different life now. I'm having a baby with someone I love. Remember how you told me you could finally be happy because you were having a child? I understand your feelings now, Daniel. I've finally found happiness. I have a daughter and another child on the way. I don't love you anymore. My feelings for you, our relationship, it all ended long ago," I said firmly. "Michelle, I was a fool. I'm going to divorce Bridget. She's been deceiving me from the start. She only married me for money. The son isn't even mine. I had a DNA test done. He's her child with another man. And worst of all, when I followed her recently, I found her spending time with the child's real father. Bridget was using my money to support her lover. I'm completely alone now. Please forgive me, Michelle. Come back to the house. Remember how happy we were when we bought it? I'll love your child like my own when it's born. I can't live without you," Daniel said, looking at me with desperate eyes. "Daniel, don't you understand how I felt when you betrayed me? I was a faithful wife during our marriage. I never once betrayed you. You destroyed everything. And now I'm pregnant. I guess this proves it wasn't just my fault we couldn't have children together," I said firmly. "Daniel, you thought you got what you deserved, but now everything you did has come back to you like a boomerang. Don't ever come here again. I will never return to you." Daniel stood there looking utterly desperate. Suddenly, the apartment door opened and there stood Derek, who had unconsciously overheard the conversation between his wife and her ex-husband. "Michelle, I got worried when you and Chloe didn't come back, so I came to check," he said. "William and Julia are already at the house, and Jeffrey can't wait to see Chloe," he added while fixing a stern gaze on the unwanted visitor. "So, what are you doing here?" he asked Daniel coldly. "I bought this apartment. I have the right to be here," Daniel replied. "How pathetic. This apartment belongs to my wife. It's hers alone. You have no rights here." Derek cut him off harshly. "Daniel, please leave. Everything is over," I said. Daniel couldn't hold back the tears rolling down his cheeks. He finally realized how deeply he regretted his actions, how he had lost his happiness, how he had destroyed everything himself. He slowly moved toward the exit. At the threshold, he turned back unexpectedly and said, "Forgive me, Michelle." Then turning to Derek, he added, "And you. Take good care of her. You won't find another woman like her anywhere in the world. Don't worry about Michelle." "I'm not foolish enough to let happiness slip away," Derek replied coldly, closing the door before turning to me. "Are you all right, Michelle?" Derek asked gently. "Yes, everything's fine," I answered, closing my eyes as I leaned into the arms of the man I loved. "Chloe, it's time to go home," I called to our little girl, and the three of us headed home together. As our happy family cheerfully left the building, a lonely man sat in his car across the street, gripping the steering wheel tightly as he watched us. It was Daniel. He could only watch as I disappeared with my family, finally understanding that he would never get me back. 3 years had passed, and our happy family gathered at our paradise-like home by the riverside for a perfect afternoon together. Derek and William were busy with the barbecue, while Jeffrey helped Chloe teach her little brother how to ride his tricycle. Julia and I lay on comfortable loungers by the river, watching our loved ones. When I look at our family, Julia, I sometimes wonder if it's okay to be this happy. I can't even imagine life without them anymore, I said softly. Oh, Michelle, you deserve every bit of this happiness. Your life is like an endless honeymoon. I'm almost jealous. Julia replied. Derek loves you so much. He'd move mountains for you, she added teasingly. You're right, Julia. Derek is wonderful. His business is thriving too. Everything's just perfect, I laughed in response. Ladies, the meat is ready. Come eat while it's hot. Derek called out. William couldn't hide his emotion as he watched us approach. Derek, we're lucky to have these women in our lives. Derek turned around, smiled at the sight of us beautiful, cheerful women, and I could see the gratitude for everything life had brought him written across his face. He now truly understood what it meant to have a real family, joy, and love. My life, once shattered by abandonment and betrayal, had transformed in the most unexpected moment. Nothing happens without reason. Every encounter has its meaning. It's crucial to recognize the signs of destiny so you don't let happiness pass you by. As I watched my beloved husband Derek playing with our children, their happy laughter filling the air, I thanked God for giving me this secure and joyful future. I was loved, and I loved my family deeply. And I knew with certainty that no matter your age, you can always begin life anew.